So, around a year ago, I picked up my first Mandarin novel. It's a Japanese translated light novel by the name of ReZero. Like it or hate it, it was my first novel, and boy, it was hard. Despite being a translation, having some sort of supposedly easier language, since mostly translations usually tend to simplify things a little bit more. However, it was still extremely hard just getting into just my first walls of text in Mandarin. However, after a lot of hard work, grit, all that stuff, I was able to now get right now to book 11, and I can now read it comfortably, knowing around at least the gist of what's going on at least every page, and not having to look up every single word every single time just to understand what the hell is going on in said novel. And this is pretty much just to say that novels can be very powerful for getting you to the next level in Mandarin. Compared to stuff like colloquial texts and stuff like TV shows, it could be a lot more of a big gap, even though those things aren't exactly bad. If you really want to get to the next level in consuming harder content like novels, audiobooks, news articles, will really get you to the things, will really help you obtain the things you need in order to go from, let's say, a B level to even perhaps a C level. It's going to take a while for you to get comfortable with, let's say, whatever this is. And in order to get comfortable in whatever this is that you're going to need to be able to learn to, well, read a lot. The more you read, usually the more comfortable you get. The more vocabulary you acquire, the more you just see it. As long as you are a bit more deliberate with it, then I promise you will be able to get comfortable with it. And novels are perhaps one of the best ways because, well, the biggest thing right away that stands out from colloquial texts and TV shows compared to something like novels and articles is simply, well, the vocabulary fit, because usually things like articles, novels will have a lot more formal and descriptive language that will be a lot harder to come by with a simple TV show, or stuff like comics and video games, depending on what you're right now immersing in. But if you're able to get into, let's say, your first novel, article, you will be able to come across these more formal texts a lot more quicker. You're able to come across such as things like descriptive text, where, for example, let's say we were to compare a TV show and a novel. In the novel, what will happen is that when you were, let's say, waking up, we would have to describe how you woke up, what you were feeling, probably perhaps what you were thinking, and then we were going to have you talk about how you stood up, then after that how you went downstairs, and then all the description, all the things you're thinking about. But not only just all that, but it also keeps what's called colloquial text, where it's going to still talk about, let's say, where you wake up, go down, and then you talk to your parent. That conversation will still be held. Meanwhile, on the TV show, it would show everything, but the thing that would only be kept would be the colloquial text. There's also some reasons why I suppose that people like novels better than TV shows were for those people out there. I think both are good, but pretty much that's one of the biggest cases, the vocab. But what about you're gonna be saying like, oh, but I don't need to learn this useless vocabulary because I'm not gonna be using it anyways. Well, you would have a point right there, especially when the vocabulary and grammar found in novels will very rarely be found and used in daily conversations. But think about it this way: if we do want to get very advanced, almost like a native level, we will have to learn how to read novels and more complicated texts because, well, that's something that native speakers can do. And also, like I said again, it's a really great way of building up our passive vocabulary. And if we do have a lot of passive vocabulary, it will be much easier to consume other pieces of content, especially when we have a bit more of the useless vocabulary. While not common in conversational things, it's going to be a lot more common in the advanced text that we want to read. But then you may say again, okay, but I don't want to be reading literature. Then, okay, fair enough. However, what if I told you that you can find a lot more useful vocabulary a lot faster if you were to read novels? Because here's the thing: when we are reading novels, we have a lot of descriptive text and density. I already mentioned that. But when we are only going to be reading TV shows, we're going to be grabbing and hopping around these things called domains. What are domains? In other words, it's almost like the topic of a video. This topic, for example, or domain, could be language learning. And I'm going to use lots of words that are related to language learning. For example, I use the word vocabulary, grammar, sentences, or probably Hanzi if we're learning Mandarin, if we want to get as specific as that. If we're to be watching a TV show more on a sitcom based thing, there's going to be a lot more talking about, okay, I'm going to go drink some water, because I haven't talked about drinking water, even though despite it being an extremely common way of just saying something in daily life, it doesn't appear in this channel because it's, well, irrelevant. And just to put this in display, all domains have their respective and, well, unique vocabulary. And what novels, and the best thing that they do, is that you can actually sort of skip domains, where novels have to be extremely creative in the way they describe things, especially, well, fiction novels. And fiction novels, when they describe things, they're gonna have to pull lots of different words and describe things in a creative way. And I'm no writing expert, but when you read a novel, they're gonna be using lots of terms you may not find in, well, certain things of just strictly daily life things. Even daily life novels will have to describe something. Let's say, for example, even common nouns that would be very useful. Let's say, for example, pillow. Unless you've watched something for an extremely long time, and even then, when someone's about to sleep, they won't just say the word pillow right there. Instead, in the novel, what's gonna happen is that when a character is about to sleep, they're gonna have to describe a pillow, and then it's much more easy to acquire that word because you're gonna see the pillow multiple times when the character is about to sleep. Nouns like these are just one example. There's also things like descriptions or adjectives, where, let's say, for example, someone were to, let's say, scrape their knee, for example, and then what were to happen is that unless you're watching something like a medical drama where they had to describe a scrape to you, what a novel would do, despite it being supposedly a lot easier and daily life based, is that they're going to scrape their knee, and then they would have to describe how the scrape looked like. Those are just a couple examples there. Even though you're not going to see lots of the vocabulary used in novels, there's still a big amount of things in novels that can be still applied to real life that if you were to only get off from TV shows, it's going to be a lot harder to do. In fact, I feel like I'm just repeating myself like a broken recorder. But let's go talk about what novels can't do, because just like almost all things and written texts, it's not going to make you exactly fluent itself. Even though novels are still extremely awesome to build a really large technical vocabulary and even get a lot of the useful vocabulary that's a lot rarer, it's not going to be useful for just fluency itself, because you're not going to be listening to things. And if you do want to just get conversational and be great at the colloquial aspect, you're going to have to, well, consume lots more conversational colloquial things like TV shows and even just daily conversations of people talking. Because in novels, even though reading novels is extremely hard, especially in Mandarin, I mean, the character system and such, people, for example, in listening based environments, they will tend to, let's say, mix up their speech a lot and won't pronounce things as clearly as they may seem in novels, for example, which I would say as well, you should also focus a good amount on listening. Audiobooks, I'd say, are a pretty good replacement for this. The only very small, tiny issue is that they tend to speak a little bit more clearly and a bit more slowly, but I wouldn't honestly care much about that because it's something that natives can understand, and if it's good enough for natives, it's good enough for me. Also, how do we start novels as well? Because, okay, now you have a way of telling us not to start novels, so here's a couple things I could give. If you're someone that's already comfortable with the basics of a language and you can watch TV shows quite comfortably, but if you feel like you could be improving more, there's still something that it just feels you haven't found, or even you have been considering to read novels but you've just been slowly putting it off, I just want to tell you right now that no matter how much preparation you will do, novels will still be extremely hard the first time. You can try to relieve it with some things, let's say going into basic graded readers, although I've never used graded readers at all, so I really can't give you my honest opinion on them. And something like comics and such, more the colloquial text, you could get into those and get a little bit of a taste of, let's say, reading a little bit. Although I'm just going to say again, no matter how much preparation you do or how much things you consume beforehand that aren't just walls of text space, you're never really going to be truly prepared for reading novels. You're always going to have some sort of brute force aspect to that. You could try things, let's say a pop-up dictionary, but I just suggest don't try to look up every single word every single time, or else it's going to just feel like you're reading a dictionary every single time. You could also try using audiobooks as well in order to make the process a bit easier, so you could listen and also read as well. It's really helped me with the first 5 books of the novel that I've been reading, and after the 6th one, it was a little bit less hard, especially when I've already been a little bit more invested in the story and I still want to sort of keep reading a little bit. Also, I suggest as well, just like with starting immersing for the first time, you try to pick something that, let's say, has been a TV show, maybe has been a TV show that has been adapted to a novel or vice versa, and then you could read the novel version of, let's say, your favorite TV show in Mandarin, and it'd be a lot more easier to understand things because it'll give you that catalyst as well. But that's really all I've got to say for now, because overall, it's going to be a pretty hard process at first. You're just going to have to stick with it, be consistent, read every day, and I promise you, you will get very comfortable after a while. It's just going to take lots of hard work. And also, just another thing as well is that as soon as you're done with a novel series, in order to stop plateauing, just simply move on to another novel series, especially if it's in a different sort of topic as well. Yes, you could also do domain hopping within novels as well. And that's really all I gotta say. So, thank you for watching. And also, if you're still interested, I have a Mandarin reading course in the description. I go more into detail about the novel reading process. Yep. We have a road to explore. 我们的旅程刚开始。